This is East Asia Tonight.
Good Friday evening. I'm Ateli Edwards. Tonight's top stories. Philippine Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro standing firm after China sanctioned him and his family. Beijing says his criticism of China's activities in disputed waters harmed bilateral ties, while Manila calls the move unjustified. And the countdown is on for the public listing of the biggest IPO in history. SpaceX just hours away from liftoff on the Nasdaq in New York. While the impact already being felt beyond Wall Street, Chinese space startups are eyeing listings on local stock exchanges, riding the wave of investor interest in the sector. And South Korea's former President Yoon Suk Yeol handed a 30-year prison term for ordering drone incursions into North Korea to help justify his 2024 martial law declaration. And South Korea's World Cup campaign is off to a winning start. A dramatic comeback victory over Czechia, sparking jubilant scenes across Seoul. K-pop supergroup BTS returns to South Korea's Busan, drawing tens of thousands of fans. The port city seizing the moment to boost its cultural reach as the group marks its 13th anniversary. Also ahead, sumo is making another international push. Wrestlers head to Paris, fresh from a successful stop in London last year, as Japan's ancient sport looks to expand its global following. China and the Philippines are embroiled in a fresh diplomatic row after Beijing imposed sanctions on the Philippine defense chief, a rare move that has drawn a sharp response from Manila. Now, China's foreign ministry said that Philippine Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro repeatedly made what it called erroneous remarks about China, harming Beijing's interests and bilateral ties.
我想在这里强调的是，特奥多罗 是菲律宾国内一小撮上蹿下跳反华分子的代表性人物。他这样肆意妄为，必然会自食恶果，损害的是菲律宾整个国家和全体人民的利益。
Mr. Teodoro, his wife and child are barred from entering mainland China, Hong Kong and Macau. Chinese organizations and individuals are also blocked from conducting business or engaging in any form of cooperation. The Philippine defense chief, in his response today, said that he will continue carrying out his duties and accused China of targeting individuals who speak, quote, the truth against their deception. The Philippine military says it stands firmly behind Mr. Teodoro, describing China's sanctions as unilateral and ungrounded. Meanwhile, Manila is seeking talks with Beijing over the sanctions. Foreign Minister Maria Teresa Lazaro says that the Philippines believes the move is incorrect and stressed that Manila prefers diplomacy and dialogue. The Philippine Foreign Ministry separately condemned the move. It called the sanctions an unfriendly act that further complicates bilateral ties. The latest dispute follows a war of words between both sides. Last week, Beijing criticized Mr. Teodoro after he described China as a threat and accused it of aggression. Now, for more analysis, let's bring in Lucio Blanco Pitlo III, a foreign policy and security analyst, president of the Philippine Association for Chinese Studies and research fellow at the Asia-Pacific Pathways to Progress Foundation. Well, thanks very much, Lucio, for joining us this evening. First up on Beijing's intentions, let's talk about the timing and the message that Beijing is sending by targeting, let's just emphasize here, not just the senior official, but also his immediate family.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you repeat that question, please?
Let's just talk about the timing and the message that Beijing is sending here.
Well, the immediate figure for the position of the sanctions likely the remarks made by Secretary Teodoro in the recent Shangri-La dialogue, wherein he, I think, one of the lines he mentioned was about the negotiation. He said that based on the Philippines' experience with China, negotiations are taken as a form to get an advantage and that the lack of good faith on the part of China. So this is according to his assessment, which I think one of the points that if the Chinese side.
And Mr. Teodoro, I mean, he's been one of the most outspoken critics of China's actions in the South China Sea. But do you think Beijing is targeting Mr. Teodoro, the individual, or is this really a warning to the Marcos administration?
Well, we could surmise that, of course, Secretary Teodoro has been very staunch and vocal critic of China's actions and activities in the West Philippine Sea or the South China Sea. But I think the Chinese side is also making a case that while differences and disputes in the South China Sea do exist, and that it's a multi-party role. So the countries that also have similar claims on that maritime space are, of course, well within the rights to defend or secure their interests, but that there's certain language or certain words or messages wherein China's shown very extreme sensitivity to. So this includes, of course, painting China at a certain light, in relation to negotiations, which perhaps in China's view would complicate efforts to resume improved dialogue. But again, this imposition of sanctions on a sitting defense secretary would, of course, the Department of Foreign Affairs of the Philippines already said that while it is a privilege of China to do that, it doesn't contribute to improving ties, and it is seen as an unfriendly act. So I think this will only inject more uncertainty into bilateral ties.
And if we look at the broader implications here, I mean, the sanctions come as Philippines, they're also deepening defense cooperation with the US, Japan, and Australia. Do you think that with the latest development, that's going to influence Manila's security calculations in any way?
Well, these developments in terms of the Philippines trying to grow its security ties with other partners beyond the US, including with Japan, and of course, the recent visit of President Marcos to Japan, wherein, among other things that they have discussed, is the opening of a negotiation for the delimiting of their maritime boundaries. I think this is also an issue that China is carefully following. But I think the efforts of the Philippines to deepen defense alliance ties with the U.S. and grow its partners, beyond Japan to actors or countries in Europe, Australia, Canada, a visiting forces agreement with France. So these things are taking place already, even before the imposition of these sanctions. So I think China already understands the trajectory of Philippine defense policy in relation to the West Philippine Sea. So I think the immediate cost of this sanction was remarks made by Secretary Teodoro on the Shangri-La Dialogue. And I think that perhaps the view in China that such language or statement, which may not contribute well in creating a space, necessary for dialogue to pursue, and especially as the two countries, along with other ASEAN partners, are trying to conclude the code of conduct this year under Manila's chairmanship.
So more broadly, Lucio, do you think tensions are entering a new phase that's more difficult and perhaps even more dangerous?
Well, certainly, I think this new development will, of course, create more risk, geopolitical risk on the South China Sea. And before, there had been reports of Philippines and China trying to restore hotline communications between their two coast guards, reestablish a joint coast guard committee that was agreed upon between the two sides in 2016. I think this sanction position on Secretary Teodoro may torpedo or stall talks for that. And overall, I think the impact on the efforts to really step up, accelerate the conclusion, finalize the COC this year under Manila's chairmanship, I think it would be a tougher ask. And while Of course, the differences are there, and the tensions and incidents are still happening despite efforts of both sides to pursue dialogue. I think it's also very important to keep cautious and calculated language to preserve maximum space for dialogue and room for maneuver. I think the South China Sea is a multi-party role, and all countries are taking steps to secure and defend their interests without eliciting such sanctions. So I think it's also very important to bear this in mind.
Right, many thanks for unpacking China-Philippines tensions for us. Lucio Blanco Pitlo III, foreign policy and security analyst and president of the Philippine Association for Chinese Studies. Right, time to shift gears now to business news. And we have Olivia Marzuki to help us unpack about China's EV market. Well, we know that it is the world's biggest, but apparently sales are slowing. So what's happening there?
I'll tell you, we're seeing a paradox here because auto shows are definitely busy. They are attracting a lot of crowds, but it is not equal to attracting a lot of revenue. So at the moment, we're seeing buyers holding off on various reasons. Sales are softer, but the light and the fight for buyers is still heating up in China's EV market. New energy vehicle sales fell 7.5% on year in May. That is the fifth straight month of decline. Automakers, though, are still pulling out all the stops. From the Beijing Auto Show last month to the recently concluded Greater Bay Area Auto Show in Shenzhen, the crowds are still turning up. Organizers said 810,000 people visited the 10-day event in Shenzhen, down from 890,000 visitors a year earlier. Automakers have been racing to stand out with new model launches, bigger discounts, and next-generation tech. Shenzhen-based BYD and tech giant Huawei made full use of their home turf, each occupying an entire exhibition hall. Guangdong rival XPeng also drew attention, showcasing its latest premium offerings. But strong footfall did not translate into stronger sales. Vehicle sales value fell by nearly 20% or 18% from a year earlier. Auto representatives told CNA that many buyers are either delaying purchases or opting for more budget-friendly models.
这里的都是比较新能源汽车，都占据了一大片的江山了，就感觉科技发展很好。现在我主要看重的是那个舒适性啊，还有那个性价比了。价格战对车企也不好，但是对老百姓也挺好的，其实很矛盾。
我觉得大湾区的车展呢，首先它是一个比较综合类型的。它不像别的车展有那么的比较垂类吧。
很多新能源是来自我们这边深圳的基地哈，就是出于我们本地人可能会更多的去考虑新能源的车，就是它省油，然后又省电，会这一些考虑我们自己的钱包的问题。
CNA's Deborah Wong is here to fill us in from Shenzhen. Deborah, after years of rapid growth, China's EV sales tumble. Why are Chinese buyers holding back spending?
So just to give you a big picture here, China's Car Passenger Association cut its 2026 outlook to 11% growth for this year, citing very unstable global situation. And across the board, consumer sentiment has been weak for some time now because of the protracted real estate slump. And so a lot of consumers are holding off on big-ticket items, big-ticket purchases. And people are also holding back because government trade-in subsidies as well as tax breaks, they all were scaled back this year. And so there was a rush of orders in 2025, which eventually led to slower sales in 2026. And when we take a look at the overall market in China, EV penetration is already quite high domestically. And so exporters and so automakers right now are, casting their eyes wider. They're looking at the overseas market instead to try to balance their sales and their profit revenue. And that's actually quite timely because right now with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, the global demand has shifted from petrol cars to EVs. And China, being one of the world's largest EV makers, is gaining an advantage because when we look at the total sales of the first 5 months of this year, China exported over 4 million cars, and nearly half of that are electric vehicles. And Deborah, what's interesting to note is that we can see the slump there, but then auto shows across China, I mean, they are jam-packed. So what does that say about the competition for buyers? Let me paint you a picture of the auto show. So at the GB Auto Show, we did see a lot of performers. There were models. There was loud music. The halls were very noisy. It was a very vibrant atmosphere. And all throughout the halls, there were also salespeople walking around, touting some financing schemes, trying to draw the crowd in, consumers in, because they are aware that budget-conscious consumers are also deterred by the lack of government subsidies right now. And there is competition, it's fierce, but sometimes who comes out on top really depends on the region that these auto shows are held. Let's hear more from an analyst.
In the south, we have BYD, we have GAC Group, we have XPeng, right? These are big players. Guangzhou, Shenzhen are one of the first cities that went with 100% fleet electrified, right? Taxis, buses. So that's clear, the regional variation, that where these players are matters, whereas in northern parts, because the weather is different. So I think it's still also important for business-wise, the organizers with concurrent events, conferences, what the automakers does to showcase their products, still is important to reach potential customers.
So unlike the Beijing and Shanghai auto shows, which are considered Class A premium auto shows, and they're larger in scale, they attract more global attention. It's also where new technologies are normally unveiled. The smaller regional shows like the Jibei Auto Show, Chongqing and Guangzhou, they do focus a lot more on consumers, on sales, and sometimes, it can also be seen as a barometer of how well the domestic market is doing. And they're also more accessible, for instance, for new entrants in the region. For instance, the GBA Auto Show, there were 300 exhibitors this year compared to a higher amount than in last year. And, although it didn't quite translate to sales.
Deborah, price war has been going on for years now. How sustainable is this price war for China's automakers?
I think the margins are definitely getting smaller. CPCA, in fact, reported that Chinese automakers' profit margins sank to a historic 2.9% low in the first 2 months of 2026. And the clearest example that we've seen, right, is China's EV giant BYD. In fact, it had one of the highest revenues in 2025, but its profit margin sank 19%. So it says a lot of the price competition. And on the flip side, battery makers, chip manufacturers, they are in fact recording quite high profit margins. So another Chinese brand, NIO, in fact, said that accounts for 50% of smart EV costs. So we look at price competition, but we also look at EV makers being squeezed by higher manufacturing costs. And that's why their profit margins have fallen. And when companies try to speed up product launches, there's a criticism here in China that EV makers are churning out cars just as how smartphones are being churned out. And that compresses and puts pressure on the supply chains as well. And it could, in fact, lead to market consolidation. Let's hear more from an analyst.
There has some rethinking the industry, whether or not we are launching the new products too fast or too many in a too short a time frame. There is some debate, but I will pretty much explain this is a result of the market competition. I think continuous commitments into the R&D technology, and at the same time to ensure your product quality and consumers' trust. I think especially when you enter into certain states that the technology innovation kind of become more mature and less disruptive. And in that situation, the long-term trust of the branding and the long-term trust of the consumers in your brands and the quality track record, that would become even more important.
So automakers right now, they are shifting beyond car sales to building entire ecosystems. We're seeing examples of them eventually producing their own batteries and chips to have a stronger control over supply chains. They're also looking at expanding into the charging infrastructure space, like what BYD is doing. While others like Xpeng are eventually diversifying to other industries like robotics, the low altitude space, as well as yacht industry. So competition right now is going beyond price and into supply chains. Back to you.
Interesting stuff. Thank you so much, Deborah. CNA's Deborah Wong reporting live in Shenzhen. And we have more business stories here on Asia Tonight after the break. Third time's a charm for Japan's H3 rocket as it managed a successful launch after 2 earlier failures, giving a boost to the country's hope for competing in the space industry. Plus, with the juggernaut SpaceX listing about to start trading in just a few hours, we'll take a look at how such new and large caps might be added to the benchmark indices sooner rather than later.
Hello again, you're watching East Asia Tonight, and just in time for a business update with Olivia Marzuki. And it looks like the countdown is on for SpaceX's stock market debut, and it's set to make founder Elon Musk the world's first trillionaire. So tell us more about that, Olivia.
Well, it is exciting time, Oteli, and SpaceX actually had little need to go public in the first place. It had access to deep pool of private capital. So secondary share sales gave employees and early investors enough liquidity without the company having to meet the stringent and that strict disclosure demand for being a publicly listed company. But investors at large have been hyping up, and they're trying to get a piece of the pie for that SpaceX share. So when it was still private, access was limited. Now, its valuation climbed, and we know its rockets and also the Starlink network become very critical. It's an important part of the space industry. So in many ways, this IPO is answering years of that hype and that pent-up demand for one of the world's most sought-after public companies and private companies.
Yeah, that's right, Olivia. And this isn't just another IPO. I mean, there's a lot of hype about it. But tell us more about that. What sets it apart? And also, why are investors paying so much attention to it?
It's not just any other IPO, right, Oteli? So this is seen as a bellwether for the larger and the broader tech sector. We are looking for signs that markets are actually ready to support the next generation of mega IPOs, especially in the fast-growing companies that have remained private for years. So a strong debut by SpaceX could encourage others waiting in the wings to move ahead with their own listings.
And so, everyone talks about how massive this IPO is, Liv. So tell us exactly just how big this listing is and also what it means for the sector.
Well, SpaceX the company has raised $75 billion in the largest IPO ever, 3 times the size of Saudi Aramco's record-setting listing. But the real test begins when the trading starts. Investors will be watching to see whether the shares can defy gravity once they hit the market. The implications stretch far beyond SpaceX itself. The company has become a major force in commercial spaceflight and satellite communications through its reusable rockets and Starlink network. Its performance could also set the tone for a wave of highly anticipated technology listings, including OpenAI and Anthropic. For markets, this is not just a test of SpaceX valuation, but also investor appetite for the next generation of tech giants. SpaceX gets the ball rolling on a $200 billion AI IPO wave, more than 5 times any single listing. Anthropic, OpenAI are set to follow suit. Experts warn of a possible market indigestion or volatility from the burst of offerings. But what actually happens once the stocks start trading? CNA's Roland Lim explains how the money flows and whether the markets would be able to stomach them.
When a company lists on a major exchange, it can eventually be added to benchmark indices, the Nasdaq 100, the Russell indices, or the S&P 500. Now, that matters because trillions of dollars are invested through passive index funds. Now, these funds don't decide whether a stock is attractive. They simply follow the benchmark. So when a company enters an index, passive funds have to buy it. Historically, newly listed firms had to wait months before qualifying. The idea was to ensure enough liquidity to absorb large institutional buying. But the rules are changing. Nasdaq now has a fast entry provision, allowing newly listed large caps to be considered for the Nasdaq 100 just after 15 trading days. FTSE Russell has also shortened its waiting period, arguing that the old rules were designed for smaller IPOs, not companies already worth hundreds of billions of dollars. For SpaceX, Anthropic, and OpenAI, that means passive buying could begin within weeks of listing, and that could provide meaningful early support for their share prices. There is one important catch: free float. Most indices weight companies on shares actually available to trade, not the full valuation. Now, in SpaceX's case, only around 4% of shares may be available initially, so the early index weight will be far smaller than the headline valuation suggests. As lockup periods expire subsequently, more shares enter the market, creating a rolling wave of demand and supply over several quarters, rather than just one single event. There is also a second effect. Now, every dollar passive funds puts into new entrants has to come from somewhere. To buy in, funds may need to trim other holdings, meaning these IPOs could shift capital flows across the broader market, not just their own share prices. The deeper risk is concentration. Now, all three companies are closely linked to the AI boom, and AI-related stocks already represent a large share of the U.S. market. If enthusiasm holds, well, fast index entry could magnify the upside. If sentiment turns, well, the same mechanism could transmit pressure just as quickly on the way down. The U.S. market is deep enough to absorb the initial listings. The real question is whether it can do so smoothly, because once these companies enter major indices, millions of investors may end up owning them automatically. Not because they chose those stocks, because the benchmark did. For CNA Explains, I'm Roland Lim.
SpaceX's blockbuster listing is raising the stakes for U.S.-China tech rivalry, highlighting the growth potential for the sector. Chinese rocket manufacturers and aerospace suppliers are now lining up to trade on China's bourses, riding that wave of investor interest. 3 companies have applied to list on the Shanghai Stock Exchange: Land Space Technology, CAS Space, and Beijing Minospace. They raised between $615 million and $1 billion US. More than 6 others are in the sector, and they are pursuing listings either in Shanghai or Hong Kong, including Beijing-based satellite ground services provider Emposat. China's commercial space market could be as large as 10 trillion yuan by 2030, according to Deloitte. That's about 1.4 trillion US. Still, analysts say that China faces a disadvantage when it comes to cost, with satellite costing $2.8 million to make China versus close to $1 million to make it in the U.S. Launch costs in the U.S. are as little as $1,500 per kilo, while in China, the number ratchets up to $5,000 per kilo. Japan's H-3 rocket returns to flight, launching for the first time in 6 months as a low-cost variant. The country's new flagship rocket is making a comeback following a string of major setbacks in an increasingly competitive space industry. The 63-meter-tall payload vehicle took off this morning from Tanegashima Space Center in southwestern Japan. The Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency said the rocket's second stage successfully launched and reached a targeted orbit. The successful launch boosting hopes for the co-developers, the country's space agency, and Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. They are targeting 6 to 8 launches annually and other space projects, including a Mars mission for 2028. Well, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries getting a lift from that successful rocket launch, though less than the overall benchmark. The Nikkei 225, which rose more than 2% on signs of a potential U.S.-Iran peace deal, and it closed down 2.8% to the upside. Now, the hope felt also in Seoul, with the Kospi up 4.6%, and Hong Kong, Hang Seng rose close to 2% by closing bell. Oil futures tumbled more than 4%, with Brent now trading around $87.12 and a WTI close to 84. And that's all I have for you in business this weekend.
Thanks so very much, Olivia. Right, we're going to go for a break now, but coming up on East Asia tonight, a court in South Korea hands former President Yoon Suk Yeol a 30-year jail sentence for sending drones into North Korea ahead of his martial law declaration in 2024. The world's biggest sporting event gets underway, with the opening match seeing host Mexico beat South Africa 2-0. This is East Asia tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. A fresh diplomatic row between China and the Philippines unfolding as Philippine Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro vows to continue his duty after Beijing imposed sanctions on him and his family. Another legal blow for former South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol as a court hands him another jail sentence of up to 30 years, this time for sending drones ahead of his declaration of martial law in December 2024. World Cup fever heating up in South Korea as its national team makes a stunning comeback victory and turns the heart of Seoul into one giant celebration. A FIFA World Cup match turned central Seoul into a giant fan zone today as thousands of South Koreans gathered at Gwanghwamun Square at lunchtime to watch their national team take on the Czech Republic. And after a dramatic comeback victory, supporters had plenty to celebrate. And CNA's senior correspondent, Yoon Suk, has a report.
The match may have been taking place thousands of kilometers away in Mexico. But for South Koreans, the place to be was right here in the heart of Seoul. Many arrived hours ahead of the match to secure a good spot. As the national anthem played before kickoff, the crowd sang along. Fans painted their faces with the Korean flag and waved cheering sticks as they cheered on the national team. Turnout exceeded the organizers' expectations. City data estimated that more than 18,000 people gathered here during the match. Some parents even took their children out of school for the occasion.
거리 응원해본 건 처음이고 거의 반대편에 하는 경기니까 못 가니까 좀 아쉬워가지고 그래도 여기서는 좀 느낄 수 있을 것 같아가지고 두 번째, 세 번째 경기도 와보고 싶어요.
And it wasn't just students and football fans. With the match taking place around lunchtime, office workers streamed into the square, squeezing in some football before heading back to work.
아니 너무 운이 좋게도 금요일 점심시간에 딱 돼가지고 그래서 저희도 이렇게 좋은 기회로 보게 된 것 같아서 행복한 금요일인 것 같습니다.
Several hundred police officers and event staff were deployed around the square to manage the crowd, which included foreign tourists.
It was amazing. It was amazing. We're big soccer fans. We've gone all over the world and watched different games, different countries. But this was really amazing to be a part of.
For these fans, it's also not just about the football game, but also the atmosphere, the chance to experience a World Cup moment together. This won't be the last time these South Korean fans will gather here. With two more Group A matches still to go, these football fans will return to Gwanghwamun Square next week when the South Korean team takes on Mexico. Yoon Suk, CNA, Seoul.
Well, earlier, the World Cup got underway in Mexico City on Thursday, with the national team beating South Africa 2-0. And nowhere was the excitement more palpable than in the fan zone, right in the heart of the capital. Tony Waterman files this report for CNA.
It was an electric start to the 2026 World Cup. Mexico fans going wild as their home team scored the first 2 goals of the tournament, the first one within the first 9 minutes of play. 55,000 people jam-packed into Mexico City's iconic Zocalo Square, the largest public square in all of Latin America, transformed into a sea of color, noise, and celebration.
This is the first time that I've been able to come to a World Cup experience. So this one, this is it. Yeah, I quit my job to be here too. So
either place that you're in the stadium or here, I think everybody's still going to have an amazing time.
I've planned for that for about half a year, so I'm very excited that it starts now to finally be here. And yeah, I think we're going to have a good time.
Massive screens broadcasting every moment of play, while food vendors, musicians, and cultural performances kept the party going long before and after kickoff. Many of the fans here say they can't afford this World Cup's eye-wateringly high ticket prices, most ranging from hundreds to thousands of dollars apiece. Being in the fan zone for free offers them something almost as valuable, a chance to experience the World Cup atmosphere alongside fans from every corner of the globe.
Yeah, so we came all the way from Ireland. We were hoping that our own team would be here, so not our own boys in green, but the other boys in green today.
The World Cup unifies people in that it brings different people of different cultures together, and we all have one goal as humanity, is to live peacefully with each other, no matter what race or country we come from.
This World Cup is the biggest in FIFA history, expanded to a record-breaking 48 teams, including 2 from Asia. South Korea, Asia's most successful World Cup team, faced off against Czechia on Thursday. Its next match is against Mexico next Thursday in Guadalajara, while Japan takes on the Netherlands this Sunday at the Dallas Stadium in Texas.
I think they're going to do pretty well. I mean, you know, last World Cup, they won against Spain, they won against Germany. At this point, I think that Japan can do anything, so.
This World Cup kicking off in Mexico City, but the games are going to be played across 16 host cities in Mexico, the United States, and Canada, bringing this game to the widest audience ever. Tony Waterman, CNA, Mexico City.
And you can watch every match live via Singapore National Media Network, MediaCorp's video streaming app MeWatch. And curated highlights are also available on MeWatch and MediaCorp Sports on YouTube, TikTok, and other digital platforms. A South Korean court has sentenced former President Yoon Suk Yeol to 30 years in prison for ordering military drone incursions into North Korea. Judges say that the operation was part of a plan to create a pretext for his controversial martial law declaration in December 2024. Now, the court found the drone flights were carried out 2 months before Yoon suspended civilian rule in December 2024. Judges also ruled that Yoon and the former defense minister tried to provoke North Korea into launching armed attacks or other serious provocations. They say the goal was to manufacture a national emergency that could justify martial law. The court also found the operation damaged South Korea's military interests. The missions at that time triggered outrage in Pyongyang, which accused Seoul of sending drones and propaganda leaflets across the border. Yoon's legal team maintains the drone deployment was a legitimate military response to North Korea's trash balloon campaign in 2024. His lawyers have vowed to appeal the ruling. The latest conviction adds to a growing list of legal setbacks for the ousted leader. Yoon remains in detention while appealing a separate life sentence for leading an insurrection through his martial law declaration. Coming up next on East Asia tonight, we were talking earlier about the debut later today of SpaceX on the Nasdaq in New York. But Hong Kong could end 2026 as the leading destination for IPOs. That's with plans afoot by the HKX chief executive to sustain the boss's momentum. Now, Hong Kong's stock exchange has seen a surge in IPO fundraising this year, more than $20 billion in the first 5 months of the year alone. Against that backdrop, Hong Kong Exchange Chief Executive Bonnie Chan says that building pan-regional connectivity and coordinating capital markets across Asia will be crucial to sustaining that momentum. Ms. Chan was speaking at the Hong Kong Exchange Future Tech Summit in Shenzhen. She said innovative sectors are playing an increasingly important role in Hong Kong's markets. The share of technology stocks in trading has risen from 15% a decade ago to 44%. Turnover in the sector has also increased more than sevenfold over the same period. But despite strong IPO momentum in Hong Kong this year, some reports have pointed to weaker post-listing share performances among certain newly listed companies. CNA's Deborah Wong spoke with Hong Kong Exchange Head of Markets Gregory Yu about the outlook for these listings.
I think Hong Kong continues to be a very strong and prominent destination for technology companies to come to Hong Kong for listing. We are further developing into fixed income and commodities. And so from a financing perspective, you can think that where you have equity listing as probably the first wave, subsequently they can also do financing in the fixed income aspect and also complement with all the commodities type of development. Recently, we've launched the HKEX Tech 100 Index. It's a composite index where we have 6 different sectors of technology. We are trying to promote the liquidity towards our technology listing via different types of instruments for investors to participate in it.
It sounds like you have a lot of new options for investors as well as mainland companies. But how is that going to measure against the competition with Shanghai's STAR market as well as Shenzhen's Chinex?
We're definitely much more of a partnership than that of competition. Stock Connect is a great example. We have been working with the 2 exchanges over the course of last 10 years and more, and we are facilitating both Chinese mainland investors coming to Hong Kong for investments, as well as bringing global investors to come through Hong Kong and invest into the Chinese mainland market. So this partnership continues to flourish.
Beijing's new outbound investment rules aim to manage capital flows as well as to protect strategic assets. We understand that the reviews could lengthen listing times for some companies. So how is HKEX working to maintain competitive time to market? Do you foresee any pressure points for the specialist tech listing pathway under Chapter 18C?
We are continuing to refining our listing rules historically. I think 18A, 18C, that has been working very well. The most important thing is that we are globally connected with many of prominent investors in Hong Kong. And that's always the cornerstone of our business because effectively we're bringing corporates coming to Hong Kong to list and all of a sudden they have a very strong global exposure. And we feel that that will continue and it's effectively our main driver of being a leader in the equity space.
Big picture right now, amid the US-China trade war and now with US also expanding its list of Chinese military companies, and of course that's gotten a lot of heavy responses from China. How do you see this shaping international investor sentiment towards Chinese tech listings in Hong Kong, and what role can the exchange play in maintaining confidence in the market?
So I want to draw your attention towards the quality of the investors that we have. So many of our cornerstone investors over the course of last year to this year have been global large institutions, whether it's sovereign funds, pension funds, insurance companies, large asset managers, very prominent institutional investors. And they're always, I guess, a key barometer in terms of the overall quality of the assets that we have listed on our exchange. And with liquidity continue to grow, we believe that it is actually a positive response.
Well, tens of thousands of BTS fans are descending upon South Korea's city of Busan for the group's concerts, with many traveling from overseas. Well, the city is using the event to showcase its attractions, culture, and cuisine to entice concertgoers to revisit. Well, CNA senior correspondent Yoon Suk reports from Busan.
For BTS fans arriving in Busan, the celebrations began long before the concert. At a temporary welcome center at Busan train station, visitors can dance to BTS songs, take photos, and connect with fellow fans from around the world.
It's our first time traveling together. We are mom and daughter, and we are army since 2020, so we are very excited.
Like thousands of other fans, they have traveled across the world for the BTS concerts in Busan. Many have packed their schedules with BTS-themed events, drone shows, and sightseeing across the city. For them, BTS and Busan are closely linked.
I know of Busan before, but I think I'm beginning to love Busan more because of BTS, because my favorite, Jungkook, this is his hometown.
Busan hopes that connection translates into something lasting. The city has launched a tourism campaign aimed at encouraging visitors to explore beyond the concert venue.
일단 관광객분들한테 부산이 정말 매력 있는 도시구나 라는 인식을 각인시켜 드려서 이번은 공연을 보고 가지만 다음에 또 와야 되겠다. 그 다음에 또 와야 되겠다. 다시 방문하고 싶은 도시로 인식되고 싶은 게 제일 큰 바람입니다.
Working with BTS agency Hype, the city has rolled out BTS-themed attractions, special menus, and fan events across Busan. And with BTS in town, one district that's battling with population decline is seeing a chance for renewal. It has embraced the color purple, commonly associated with the group. This neighborhood in Busan is called Amidong, similar to the name of BTS global fan base, ARMY. Here, local officials are trying to market the area as a tourist destination for BTS fans. Visitors can follow themed stamp trails, leave messages for fellow fans, and take in panoramic views from the Cheonmasan Observatory.
저도 아미의 일원으로서 그래서 그거를 아이디어를 던져가지고 우리가 이걸 링크를 걸어서 일단 흥미 유발을 해보는 게 어떻겠냐 이렇게 화두를 던졌고 거기에 대해서 일단은 반응은 좋은 편인 것 같습니다. 리버풀이 비틀즈로 관광 산업을 활성화시켰듯이 우리 부산, 서구, 아미동도 그렇게 활성화시킬 수 있다고 저는 굳게 믿고 있습니다.
For Busan, the goal extends beyond a single weekend of celebrations. Officials hope visitors leave not only with memories of BTS, but with stories of the city itself, and perhaps a reason to return.
BTS in Busan!
Yoon Suk Yeol, CNA, Busan, South Korea.
Some of the world's top sumo wrestlers are in Paris this weekend as the French capital hosts its first major tournament in 3 decades. Well, more than 60 wrestlers are taking part, including top rankers Yokozuna, Hoshoryu, and Onosato. The tournament opens tomorrow, bringing Japan's ancient sport to a European crowd and a chance to win over new fans. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for you on this Friday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Hope you've enjoyed the bulletin. And don't forget, if you need headlines, anytime at cna.asia. And look us up on all our socials, Facebook and YouTube. And for our Singapore audience, do stay on for highlights from the opening matches of the FIFA World Cup.
Asian powerhouse South Korea got the World Cup campaign off to a winning start in an exciting Group A encounter against Czechia. After some wasteful finishing from the South Koreans, it was the informed Czechs who took the lead, Captain Ladislav Krejci stealing in to put the Europeans ahead in the 59th minute. The Taekook Warriors fought back and were rewarded in the 67th minute, midfielder Hwang In-kyung notching the equalizer. The Czechs appeared to edge ahead again 10 minutes later, only for Tomas Souček's effort to be ruled offside, spurring the South Koreans to take the lead 3 minutes later through substitute Ong Hyung-kyu, as the Asian Giants clung on to a precious 2-1 victory. And that result coming after co-host Mexico got the tournament off to a flyer against South Africa in the repeat of the opening match of the 2010 World Cup. This game started very differently, with the Mexicans taking a 9th-minute lead at the sold-out Azteca Stadium. Julian Quinones profiting off a goalkeeping error as the tricolor finished the first half 1-0 ahead. South Africa went down to 10 men early in the second half before Mexico made it 2-0. 35-year-old Wolves striker Raul Jimenez stealing away from the South African defense in the 67th minute for his first ever World Cup goal in what's his 4th straight appearance at the finals. The visitors then had a second player sent off before the Mexican had one of their own see red towards the end of a chaotic match that sees Mexico go top of Group A.